Hi, welcome to my live video about Sun in the first house in astrology. If you would like your own personal, private, confidential psychic tarot reading or an astrology birth chart reading from me, make sure you contact me on my website, lamarrtownsendtarot.com. I would love to read for you. Also, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're new. Hit the bell next to the subscribe button, whether you're new or not, so that you get a notification whenever I go live. And I thank you all for being here. Remember that if you want a personal reading, you can check out my website, lamarrtownsendtarot.com. Hey, Phyllis. Hey, Asia. How is everyone doing tonight? I hope you guys are enjoying your Sunday at the timing of making this video. And let's get into the tea. So who in here has Sun in the first house? Let's talk about the first house. So for those of you who aren't so keen on astrology or how it works, astrology and the zodiac signs are divided into 12 segments or 12 houses, which means that each zodiac sign has a ruling house as well as a ruling planet. Each house has a ruling planet as well as a ruling zodiac sign. So the first house is ruled by Mars, all right, because Aries, which is ruled by Mars, is the first zodiac sign, right? So Aries starts the year, Aries starts the zodiac. So Aries rules the first house, and often the first house is associated with being the rising sign or the ascendant sign, okay? The first house has many different names, so it can become really confusing. So you kind of have to know and understand that the first house is basically the same thing as the rising sign, which is basically the same thing as the ascendant sign, right? And the first house is ruled by Mars. So Mars, the first house rules our general outlook on life. It also rules our personal, how people view us. It also rules our physical attributes or our physical appearance. It also rules how we go about getting what we want. It rules self-assertiveness. Okay, it rules our self-image, the image that we project out into the world, which is why people often say that the rising sign is so important. But having your Sun in the first house of the rising sign makes it even more important, because here we have the Sun, which rules our creativity, our zest for life, right? It also rules our connection to our childhood and children. It rules romance and romantic energy. Okay, it also rules our connection to our life purpose and our higher self. So you just listened to my Sun in the fifth house. Yes, Obia 1C. Where's the website you gave me that I can find my birthday planet? I don't remember. I use a lot of different websites, but I actually use my own. I don't use my own, but I use the software for natal charts now. I don't use websites anymore. So, but any website will work well to find out where your planets are placed in your chart. But Sun in the first house. So when we have the Sun, which rules creativity, romance, friendship, harmony, how we go about expressing ourselves in life, to have it in the first house of self-image, of, the image that, we project out into the world, and the image, how people see us. Often I find that people who have Sun in the first house are often kind of, how do I say this? They're known for something. Like, people always know them for something that they do a lot of the times. Because remember, the first house is how people see us. It's the image that we project out into the world. So, a Sun in the first house, which, the Sun rules creativity, something, creativity, romance. A Sun in the first house person can be known, for example, for being very creative. A Sun in the first house person can be known for being very, very creative, especially when it comes to solving problems, right? So whenever someone feels like, oh, I'm in a crunch and, I need to find a quick solution to my, problem, that person will most likely, reach out to a Sun in first house person, right? A Sun in first house person, depending on what your Sun is in, right? Because remember, we're not just our Sun sign, we're a Moon, rising, Venus, Mars, Mercury, right? But we also have to remember that our planets or our placements in our birth chart are placed in certain houses. So it's important to know where your planets are placed in context to your houses in your birth chart. So that's why it's so important to get a birth chart reading. So, for example, you can have a Sun in Virgo in the first house and be known as someone who's a great listener, someone who's, gives good advice, something like that. You can have a Sun in Capricorn in the first house and be known as someone who's a hard worker, something like that. So it really depends on what your Sun is in context to your first house. And also keep in mind that just because the first house is actually ruled by Aries and Mars doesn't mean that that's actually where your first house is in. So that's why it's important to get a birth chart reading, okay? But the first house, by the way, I only see one like, and I see 11 people in here, so I need more likes, people. Thank you for listening and liking the video. I really appreciate it. So a sun in first house person also puts a lot of emphasis on their self-image. How they look, how they appear is very, very important. Often you will find a sun in first house person, especially when they're going out on a night on the town, like they put a lot into how they look. A sun in the first house person will be in the mirror, because this is an interesting thing I noticed about sun in the first house people, is that they have a kind of uncanny ability to predict how people will see them based on how they look, based on what they're projecting out into the world. So they're really sun in the first house people, especially if you have sun in the first house in like an air sign like Libra, who puts a lot of emphasis on how they look, or even Taurus, who, you know, both are ruled by Venus, or even an earth sign, probably Virgo, you know, Capricorn as well. You know, they put a lot of emphasis. They care a lot about what people think, especially when it comes to, you know, security and, you know, all those types of things, right? So a sun in the first house person has a way of swaying people's opinions about them, all right? A sun in the first house person makes a really, really good PR, like a PR person, a person who would work really well in PR, or like someone who would work really well at directing a person's public persona. You know, public personas are very, very important to a person with a sun in the first house. All right. It's very, very important that they, you know, look a certain way, that they come off a certain way when you have sun in the first house, right? And in that way, they can be a bit manipulative. Like, for example, first impressions are really, really important for sun in the first house people, because they know that first impressions can often be a lasting impression. You know, so sun in the first house people put a lot of emphasis on, once again, how they come across, how they look. You know, all these things are very, very important when it comes to sun in the first house people. Now, when you have sun in the first house, you can also be a bit aggressive too, all right? Because that's Mars energy. Mars rules aggression, it rules war, it rules self-assertiveness. So sun in the first house people, especially if you have your sun in a fire sign or an earth sign, tend to be go-getters. All right, like they tend to be go-getters. They're not the types of people who sit around and wait for something that they want. They're gonna go wait and get it. You know, so in the first house people, once again, especially if you have it in a fire sign, you're more willing to take risks. You're more willing to go out on a limb in certain instances, especially if it will improve your public persona, if it will improve people's thoughts about you. Remember, like some of the first house people will do a lot of things just for the sake of people seeing them a certain way. Some of the first house people will do or say certain things just so that they come across a certain way. Like some of the first house people put a lot of emphasis on how they come across, how they look. You know, and a lot of times they'll ask you, how do I look in this outfit? You know, was I too brash when I did that? Like, that's a sun in the first house person. You know, they care a lot about what people think, but sometimes it can come across as being just a bit self-absorbed. So I noticed that sometimes sun in first house people can be a bit self-absorbed as well. But sun in the first house people, you know, depending on where the sun is placed, they can have a very broad perspective of life. They can have a very kind of unique perspective of life as well. I noticed, because you have to remember that the first house rules our general outlook on life, right? So sun in the first house people, especially if you have, for example, a sun in a water sign, for example, sun in the first house in a water sign, tends to have kind of an emotional, more emotional perspective on life, meaning that wherever your sun is placed, if you have a sun in an earth sign, that means that your focus is more so on the materialistic world. Your focus is more so on practical things. If you're an air sign, you know, in the first house, your focus is more so on intellectual things, you know, fact-based things, right? If you are a fire sign in the first house, your focus is more so on things that can actually materialize, kind of like the earth signs, but more so it's like your go-getters. You know, you are more focused on, okay, is this something that can actually happen or not? To have a sun in a water sign in the first house means that you're more focused on the emotional aspects of life. You're more focused on the smaller, finite, I think that's how you say it, details of the human experience. So there's a lot of good things that comes with, you know, having sun in the first house, and a lot of bad things that comes with having sun in the first house. Because remember, with having your sun in the first house, this is also a projection. So people will project a lot onto you, okay, with your sun in the first house. Because once again, you have to remember that the sun is kind of how we go about life, how we go about getting what we want, how we express ourselves. So when you have this in the first house, people are always going to put pressure on you. People are always going to put their problems, their worries, their issues onto you to fix them when you have your sun in the first house, right? Because especially if you have your sun in a house that is or if you have your sun in a sign that is used to actually helping people or putting people before themselves, such as Virgo, Aquarius, or even Libra, right? Or Pisces sometimes. I find Cancer, like sun in the first house people can sometimes get a lot of flack, like as well. Like sometimes because people get used to seeing sun in the first house people a certain way, and then when a sun in the first house decides to break out of that mold that someone's put them in or that someone has projected onto them, people sometimes get upset with that. So sometimes sun in the first house people struggle a bit with coming into their own, especially I noticed when sun in the first house people are younger. And one experience I find with sun in the first house people is that you often have people come up to you or deal with you and say, I remember when you were this way. I remember, when you did this and that. And it's like, yeah, sun in the first house people need room to grow and evolve. A lot of people don't want to see sun in the first house people grow and evolve because they get used to you guys being a certain way. They get used to you guys, especially once again, if you have sun in a people pleasing sign, right? Like people get used to you guys being a certain way. And then when you choose to evolve and grow, that's when all hell breaks loose, right? So having sun in the first house isn't always roses and gumdrops and things like that. My mom and oldest brother are sun in the first house. Child, yes, we're back on. Yes, Siobhan. Hey, Shalita. Sun in Capricorn first house with Venus, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune in North Node. Wow, that's a lot of first house energy, child. Hey, Eddie, what's up? How are you? How's everyone doing? Taurus lucky next year, huh? No, retrograde. Hello, hey, Ella, LA, Alexis, or is it LA Lexus Beauty? I don't even know how to say that. L Alexis Beauty. I have Saturn in the first house. Oh, interesting. Yeah, well, the first house rules our general outlook on life. So having Saturn in the first house tells me that career is very important for you, Eddie. Having security, having a secure career, a professional life, that's very important for you. And probably something you will eventually be known for, over time. I also noticed that sometimes Sun in the first house people can be a bit temperamental. All right. Especially when things are moving too slow or things aren't going their way. I do notice that Sun in the first house people can be a bit temperamental. Once again, especially if you have Sun in a earth sign or a fire sign. All right. Sun in the first house people tend to also want things their way, their way and their way only. Saturn in the first, do you look older than your age or act older? Yes, exactly. I forgot. Saturn. Well, Eddie, I don't know. Eddie's pretty mature for his age, I would say. Yeah, I act kind of older. I look younger for my age. Yeah, exactly. You have Saturn in Pisces. Oh, okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, Eddie's one of the people that there are certain people in my chats that I talk to outside of, the chats. So Eddie's my dude. Like kings and queens want to be treated like royalty. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Lions Earth. That is what I'm saying. And it's interesting because I find that so in the first house people also get used to being treated a certain way. And when they're not treated, that way any longer, and it could be the Aries energy because you guys know Aries love to be treated like royalty and like they're regal and all that type of energy. And it's not that they aren't, but I noticed that Sun in the first house people have that same kind of energy where they expect to be treated a certain way. So true. Twin self-discovery and different every year. Sun in the 12th house and 10th house moon video, please. Yes. Coming soon. My mom is a first house Cancer stellium. She's all about self. Exactly. And that's what I said earlier. I was like, sometimes Sun in the first house people can be a bit self-absorbed. All right. And a bit insensitive sometimes too, I will admit as well. Especially when they've reached their limit. Excuse me. Especially when they've reached their limit. You know, sun in the first house people can be a bit insensitive to other people's feelings. They can be very harsh and abrasive, all right, very blunt and straightforward. Once again, especially if you have, you know, I want to say, especially if you have your sun, you can be very abrasive. My nose is getting stuffed, Jesus Christ. You can be very abrasive if you have your sun in a fire sign, an earth sign, or an air sign in the first house. You can be very abrasive. Just in terms of like having no filter sometimes, especially when you're angry. Lord, everyone's asking like for their video next. Yes, Chiron and Gemini in the ninth house. Yes, exactly. That's coming soon. Being a Cap will make you act older, but you gotta double time. Exactly. Being a Cap isn't always easy. Saturn is not always the nicest planet. I mean, it just is what it is. I also noticed that sometimes Sun in the first house people struggle with accepting defeat or accepting things not going their way. I noticed that as well. You know, and Sun in the first house people hate when people see them differently than how they want to be seen. You know, like for example, if you have a Sun in the first house person who's dealing with someone else, and that person is like, I don't like that Sun in the first house person. You know, I just feel like they're so sneaky and shady and this and that. A Sun in the first house person will be like so obsessed with trying to change that person's perspective or opinion, you know, about them. You know, like, you know, that's a Sun in the first house person. Because Sun in the first house people also know the power of, you know, the power of what's the phrase I'm thinking of? Not the spoken word, but the power of the word of mouth. All right, I think that's how I want to say it. The power of the word of mouth, and how people, just one negative experience with you can change, you know, a lot of people's perspective about you. Especially if that one negative experience, you know, kind of gets out, you know, into the ethers. So a Sun in the first house person is always like, you know, kind of polished, you know, always focusing on themselves, making sure that they look good, that they come across, you know, good, and that, you know, people understand them, you know, and understand how they're trying to come across. Sun in the first house is like a Sun in Aries. Exactly. Thank you, Eddie. I'm starting from fresh again in life at the moment. Tough, lost all my so-called previous friends. I honestly feel forgotten by family. Too kind of low, but I'm optimistic. Yes, Lines Earth. Yes, tell me about it. I know someone who's in Aries and she's harsh and wants to be treated like a effing princess. Yes, exactly. Welcome to a Sun in first house. All right. Welcome to the Sun in first house, people. Yes, we do. Is it a good idea to date the same sign, or will we clash? It depends. You have to remember that, you know, you're not just a sun sign, you're a moon sign, a rising sign of Venus, and all that types of things. So it's deeper than just sun, you know, sun compatibility for sure. All right, but having Sun in the first house comes with its good traits and its bad traits. All right, people will project things onto you. People will expect things from you that you will not always be able to deliver. All right, or not, you will not always feel like delivering. All right, but you know, this is the life of a Sun in Aries or a Sun in first house person. You know, now the great thing about it is that you always have the ability to rise to the occasion. All right, especially if you have a Sun in a, you know, a very kind of sturdy sign, such as an earth sign, certain fire signs, Leo and Aries mainly, and maybe Cancer energy. All right, like you're very sturdy and you're able to rise up to the occasion. And Scorpio, I'll say that as well. Actually, I met someone with a Pisces moon and I love him already, especially with my moon in Scorpio. Yes, will Pisces clash with Pisces? It depends. Pisces and Pisces can sometimes be a bit of an emotional kind of overwhelming experience for both parties, because both parties want to be heard and want to be understood, and so it depends. I like your clueless shirt. Thank you. You're welcome. So these are just some things I've noticed about having Sun in the first house. I personally don't have Sun in the first house. I have Sun in the fifth house. So check out that video if you would like to be interested to know what Sun in the fifth house is like. And this is my series about having your Sun in the houses, all right? And we're going to do more like these with the different planets. and the different asteroids and all those types of things. So I thank you guys for being here. This is my Sun in the First House video. If you would like a reading from me, contact me on my website, LamarrTownsendTarot.com. Remember, I am an astrologer as well as a psychic tarot reader. So I would love to read for you. And please remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the bell next to the subscribe button so that you get a notification whenever I go live, okay? You have your Sun in the 7th and 8th house. I'm in the 6th, so we're neighbors. Yes, the 6th house is the house of self-improvement, work, job, and health. So, ruled by Virgo, to be specific. Hey, Aisha. Yeah, you're a little late, but it's okay. This is not, this is just, so there's something on YouTube. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of YouTube tea. All right now, there's such a thing as it's called evergreen content. And so evergreen content is content that people look up all the time. So I try to keep my channel balanced between having evergreen content and content, that people need now, such as readings and those types of things. So this right now is evergreen content. So whenever I'm doing an evergreen content video, I really don't want it to be too long. If it goes overboard, then it's okay. But I really don't like these videos to be too long, But you guys know how I get when I get on live. So thank you for being here. And that's just a little bit of YouTube tea. Maybe I'll do like a video about how to like be successful on YouTube. I don't know. I got a comment recently about how did I get so many subscribers? And I'm just like, it's literally through hard work. I mean, you can buy subscribers, but you're going to get clocked for that. You can buy likes. You're going to get clocked for that probably too. So, you have to have some type of plan on YouTube. Like you can't come on here just winging it. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to know what the hell you're doing on YouTube to be successful. So that's my little tea, my YouTube tea for my YouTubers out there who want to be successful. I love you guys. That's smart though. I get it. Yes, Aisha, that's what I'm saying, so just a little bit of method to my madness. I love you guys. Thank you for listening and watching. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the bell next to the subscribe button, whether you're new or not. And contact me for a personal reading on LamarrTownsendTarot.com. I hope you guys have a great new year. All right, celebration. I'm actually having people over to tomorrow, so family mainly. So I'm going to have to do some cooking and cleaning. Ciao. Good things happen to good people. You deserve it. Thank you, Sage Productions. Not buying followers. No, ma'am. Exactly. Thank you, Siobhan. That's such a waste of money. But a lot of people do it. I've never done it. And I don't plan on ever doing it. But I'm going to keep my mouth shut, all right? To not further incriminate myself, okay? For those who do purchase followers, honey. But anyways, love you guys. Peace, love, and light. And have a great day.